We are back. It's Where Does It Go Wednesday with Ask Evelyn. So thank you everybody for joining us. Pat and I are going to get ourselves situated. Eventually we'll get this dialed in a little bit better in our introductions. Um, but thank you everybody for watching. We hope you've had a really good week and we're super excited to come at you again to answer some more questions as Evelyn the envelope. So, as always, if you guys have questions, please send them to us. You can put them in our comments, and you can also send them to askevelyn@seattle.gov. I skipped. Apologies. Let me introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
So, so I'm Becca Fong, and I am an outreach planner for solid waste at Seattle Public Utilities, which means I get to talk to folks about what goes in their recycle, compost, and garbage.
And I'm Pat Kaufman. I'm the commercial recycling and composting program manager for Seattle Public Utilities. Get to talk to businesses about what they can do to reduce their waste, recycle more, compost more, all that fun stuff.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us. It's been awesome to see you guys come through our feed at the bottom every week, and it's pretty fun. It's a nice way to get connected with everyone. So we've got two questions today, and let's see. Excuse me while I scroll through and look at my questions. I think Pat, you're going to kick us off.
I got the first one. I got the first question.
We got our first question. It's about kind of recycling multiple objects with multiple types of parts, and then also a little bit more about what do we do with some of that extra stuff that we've got at home. So Pat, why don't you kick us off?
This is a good one. This is from Maria. Maria writes, Dear Evelyn, what do I do with things that are mostly metal, but some plastic like handles, or wood, more handles, like pots and pans, or maybe a broken toaster? Can they go in the recycle bin, or do I have to take them apart to recycle them? So we talked about this, and we do provide guidance to folks that pots and pans with a little bit of a plastic handle on it, that's okay to put in the recycling. Something like a toaster, no, you don't want to put that in the recycling. You're not in the cart. You can recycle it via one of the special collection services that we have. The problem with the toaster going to the recycle center, whereas a pot or a pan is very, it's kind of a simple item. It can tumble along the conveyor belt. The magnets will pick up the metal and such. A toaster, it's got a bunch of innards. It's got the cord. It's maybe got one of those trays that slide out. It's not what we want to have in the collection of commingled recycling. So you kind of have to use that as your gauge. If you have like a metal tin, or you have, there's also dimensional considerations. Like we usually provide a guidance of 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. Like it can't be much bigger than a beach ball kind of thing.
That's pretty big.
That's pretty big. It is pretty big. You're right. I mean, that's kind of the dimensions we do for our guidance. But it shouldn't have a bunch of appendages, a bunch of cords and things either.
To get stuck in everything.
That's right. Yeah, you got to think about the sorting operation and what's not just safe, but just what's practical to go through a sorting system. So the other options, like I was mentioning, you can go online or you can call up and you can sign up for a special collection. And Becca, it can also be like a bucket of materials, right? You could accumulate some things.
Totally. And actually, it's kind of funny Maria mentioned a toaster because our toaster gave it up this last week. So we have a toaster that is actually mostly metal. And let me tell you, I tried really hard, people, to fix this thing. It was like 3 people in my household tried to make this work. We thought we figured it out. We're usually pretty good at it. It served us well. It's mostly metal. So something like this, even though it's mostly metal, it's got kind of these plastic handles. It's got this plastic parts. Let me tell you, like Pat was saying, as I took this baby apart, there's a lot of non-metal pieces in here, but also a lot of good metal pieces.
Right.
So I think what I'd be able to do is I could, take it apart, take the metal off, and put the metal pieces in the commingled recycling.
You could.
Maybe these little things that would get stuck and stuff, and then throw the plastic and the cord away.
Or self-haul it to the transfer station, which, we're not encouraging a bunch of extra hauls right now to the stations with staffing challenges, and they're not open every day right now. So the point is, though, it would be accepted as is, the way you're holding it. You could toss that whole thing right on the scrap metal pile at the transfer station, right? So if it's got a lot of metal, like say a barbecue, people in the backyard, they're like, oh, this barbecue is toast, it's not working anymore. It's got a wood handle, it's got plastic knobs, it's got tubing and wiring and all kinds. That's fine. The whole thing with the plastic wheels, the whole mostly metal barbecue could be placed on the scrap metal pile. But you do want to be considerate of that. You don't want to send like the briquettes that are inside, those raw briquettes, you should pull those out. Anything that's like removable from the item that isn't metal should be removed. So it's not like a green light to everything. I think the cord's a question mark. Yeah, I mean, there's copper in there, but there's not a lot of copper in a simple little appliance cord. It's not like housing copper wire where there's value there. So yeah,
totally.
Little clock radio that's seen better days, and it's I'm not going to throw it in the garbage. It's one of the older ones, so it's got a lot of metal inside. You know, that's the other thing. The older an item is, if it's solid state, you know, if it's been around the block and it's had well, if it's just from a past generation, most of the components inside are steel. You know, all the bracketing and stuff, it's all metal. So the older the item is, the more likely it is accepted for recycling in the metal.
Totally. And I think, so just kind of a quick reminder, I was also thinking about on our Where Does It Go flyer, we used to have a big 5-gallon plastic bucket with a metal handle.
Right.
And people used to ask us all the time, like, well, what about the metal handle? Do I have to try to pry it off? And it's kind of what you're saying. If a material is mostly one material and is a simple shape, so a plastic bucket with a little metal wire handle, if it's, you know, like just the metal pieces off my toaster, those things could go in the commingled recycling. Simple, mainly one metal. A pot with a handle on it, that's okay. And if you have other things like your clock radio, like my toaster, you can always schedule a special item pickup, and in a 2x2x2 box, you can put a whole bunch of stuff in there and we will pick that up curbside, because we don't want people going to the transfer station right now to drop off their toasters. So. Right.
If it's in good shape, if it's still working, you don't want it, you can donate it to thrift. You know, you can donate to Goodwill or something like that. The other alternative, if it's not working, you can take it to a couple of the electronics recyclers in town. There's Interconnection and I'm forgetting the other 3R Technologies.
3R.
RePC. These companies are mostly targeting electronics in the computer space, right? Laptops and maybe some TVs, but mostly computers and peripheral computer materials. But they are recyclers of various metal and scrap plastic. So they would take a clock radio. They might charge you $5, you know, or something like that. I'm not sure. That's private sector kind of efforts, but those are also really good options for taking, you know, odd appliances over to them.
Totally. All right. So simple materials, even if they're mixed, they're mainly one material, they can go in the bin. If not, you can use our special item pickup, get a 2x2x2 box at your house and put some different stuff in it. When you go online at seattle.gov/special items, it'll have a whole list of all kinds of other things we will take from you, which is really a good option right now because we don't want a lot of unnecessary trips to the transfer station. So it's a pretty good option. You can put them out on your collection day and we'll pick them up. There's usually a small fee associated with them, but it's pretty worth it to not have to go down there. Our second question actually is kind of what you're saying, if things are working. Right. So this question comes to us from Angel. Dear Evelyn, I've got some old clothes that I'm ready to donate. Is there any place that is open right now? Thanks. So that's a really good question. Angel brings up a good point. And we've talked about this, you know, a little bit in Ask Evelyn so far, but I think it's going to keep coming up. The longer we're home, we're kind of looking around and looking at all these things that we have. And it's like, you know, do I really need this? Maybe I don't need this anymore. Maybe somebody else could use it. And so it actually was really a great question because it had me go and figure out who is open. So I think donating to thrift is always a good option. I went and I looked at one of our partners, Goodwill. So we normally have a donation site at the North Transfer Station. That site is currently not open. We're looking at hopefully opening that in the next week, but check our website for the transfer stations to see when we will open that again. I did see that Goodwill did open 2 locations in Seattle, one in Ravenna and one at their main Dearborn location. I would check their website. They've been very good about updating when they are open. They're trying to make sure that everybody is safe. They're making sure that they have extra time to make sure that everything's sanitized and everything's cleaned. So they are definitely open, but I would check before you go. I tried to look up Northwest Center, the big blue truck, because we partnered with them quite a bit. Their website was not as updated. I would go ahead and give them a call. They may be doing at-home pickup. That may be another option they have if you have a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
There's,
So
the Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, there's Value Village, there's other independent thrift organizations that may be open. So it's definitely worth checking. It might be a good time to, take your materials to the thrift stores right now. But Goodwill, definitely, I understand from them that very few, if any, of their collection points where you would normally see like a trailer and a little shed in
right.
a parking lot, please do not just drop your materials there. That's not how it works. The station has to be staffed, and they have to be there to say
Totally.
or no to your item.
Absolutely. And I mean, and none of the Ask Evelyn watchers would ever be doing anything like that. You guys
No,
are all on
no.
point all the time, but spread the word. I mean, unfortunately, we have seen some dumping at some of the donation sites, which is unfortunate. And then, of course, my other option that I always like to plug is see who you can share it with locally. If you've got a Buy Nothing group, if you've got neighbors in the community. I know that there's community organizations in my area that are looking to help other folks who, just need more things, right?
Yeah,
I've got kids clothes that I've sent out. I've posted on a Buy Nothing group like, hey, does anybody need these extra sweatshirts? My kids don't need them. And a lot of families are like, sweet, I would love that. So I think that that's always a really, really good option to look into. Keep it local. You don't have to have the thrift process it at this point.
right.
And some other folks can totally make their day, which is pretty awesome. So just another way to make connections in these times where we're not as connected with each other.
That's true. Those online processes are good ones. It's also good to just repair your clothes, right?
That is true.
That's
That is
right.
true.
So I have my example here. I can zoom in. My darn socks. So, I mean, they're perfectly good. All the uppers are fine. And it's just my toes just poked through a couple of times. So there you go. You just have to, a little bit of, sewing time and you get a whole lot of more life out of a pair of socks, for example.
Totally. I'm like, I have to share my one example. So my scarf is actually 2 old t-shirts that have been ragged.
Nice.
And I cut the bottoms off and I made them into a colorful scarf, which has been kind of fun. So they were such brightly colored that I just cut the bottoms
Yeah.
and just sewed them
Sure.
together. And they're
Nice.
just like a nice long infinity scarf. And then the top
you
I'm
go.
still using as a rag. So that was kind of fun.
Great.
It took
That
me
is-
all
that
of
is
like
a-
5 minutes
yeah.
to do that. And I'm not necessarily the handiest person. But it's kind of nice to just have something a little new and a little fun. So that's been pretty fun. We had a really quick reminder that we wanted to share with folks. So when we're talking about special item collection, we're talking about the people who are taking donations. There are a lot of folks who are still out there, out and about. A lot of us are staying home, which is great, but a lot of folks don't have that luxury. So we
Right.
wanted to put a quick plug in to remind folks, especially for our collection drivers out there and our folks at the stations, if you do encounter them, please make sure to stay away from them. They love seeing you and they get it too. They
Yeah.
want to make sure that you're safe. They want to make sure that they're safe and their families are safe. So make sure you stay back. But if you see your drivers or you go to the station, a big thumbs up, a big thank you,
Sure.
a big distanced hug. They love that. They would love a
It's been
sign that
fun.
was their support.
Working from home, I'm home now during collection times on our Tuesdays is our day, and so I make a point I hear the truck and you can totally hear them coming, and you can step out on the porch or walk out the walk and kind of give a little wave. And sometimes they're so in their groove that they are not looking to wave. They are
Oh yeah.
jamming, they're moving from house to house, so there's no opportunity. I'd have to totally get in their space, but I don't want to do that. I'll look for the
Right.
opportunity to say hello and thank you. And just a gesture. And the guys that do, notice me and wave back, it seems like a good moment. But it's good. I mean, I think, some folks you see on social media, see some kids and whatnot are making little thank you signs and things for their collection drivers. And that's great. That's a great, I mean, it's tough, going to work in this situation. They don't get, one of the things about the crews, is a lot of jobs are about who you work with, right? And there's the
Right.
work time, and then there's the time with your crewmates.
Yeah.
And they don't really get that right now. They don't have their morning meetings right now. They don't have what they call the morning launch at the yard where they come and get in their trucks. They don't have that time, the camaraderie, the interaction. They have to go right from their private vehicle to their truck, and they go. And then at the end of the day, they have to wipe down everything and then head to their vehicle. There's not, so it's tough. It's one of their frontline employees that deserve a lot of appreciation,
Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing at the transfer stations. They're not able to have their tailgates
Yeah.
and see each other. And They're waving at each other from across the floor.
Right.
So, you know, even if they don't acknowledge you, they appreciate it a lot. I've heard from a couple of the folks and they're just like, man, every time we see somebody and they appreciate us, it makes it worth it. Like the collection drivers are out there, you know, tipping 800 households a day. That's a lot. So it's, you know, they're really busy. So, but yeah, thank you guys. And, you know, kind of one more reminder along on that front, make sure that as, you know, we don't want our drivers to be exposed to anything. As you're putting materials in, we have about a 25% increase that we're seeing in residential collection. I was just talking with Recology yesterday, and I was shocked, 25%, because we're all home. Yep. But make sure you have extra stuff, bag your garbage, keep it in the cart, your recyclables, keep it contained, because we don't want the drivers handling it any more than they need to. So
that's right.
That'd be awesome.
Bag your garbage, but do not bag your recycling.
Yes, make sure that it's
no,
that's a good point. It's a good point. So last week, Pat and we kind of made a pledge to try some new things. In my mind, and I don't know, I haven't run this by you, Pat, but in my mind, it's like how to teach old dogs new tricks, us being the old dogs.
Okay.
And so we're trying a few behaviors, because changing your behavior is always really, really hard. This whole time of COVID is a really good example of that. But we had pledged last week to try to not throw away leftover food, right? So Pat, how'd you do? I have a feeling you did better than me.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. You know, it's funny being home more often and trying to limit our trips to the grocery store. We're doing a lot more meal planning and a lot more assessment of like what's left in the fridge. What can we actually make a meal out of before we take another trip to the store? So we're trying to limit, you know, the trips and exposures and all that by eating a lot of what we have on hand and making interesting meals sometimes, you know, kind of doing that cutting board meal where I pop open a can of sardines and have some olives and some cheese and some bread, and you just kind of, that's good, that'll work, you know. So that's been fun doing that. Just trying to save. And you know, there's the Love Food Stop Waste. I want to get that plug in.
Oh yeah.
Program to really reduce food waste, to minimize the wasted food that occurs. Our waste prevention efforts at SPU include that. You know, on the commercial side and the residential side. And so the Love Food Stop Waste website is a great source for like meal planning templates, shopping guides, you know, different techniques and strategies for like freezing portions of things you purchase so they'll last longer, and just a whole bunch of things about how to store certain things in the vegetable drawer together, and things, you know, shouldn't be on the counter next to each other because they sort of make the other item ripen faster, and stuff I had no idea about. So now it's really interesting to have that information.
Totally. Yeah, that's been
I also think no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I like the cutting board meals. I think that that's a really good option, just to kind of, you know, expand your idea of what a different meal is. And for me, because I've got little kids and they don't always eat all of their meals, there's a lot of like leftover bits that are left over. I would say I did pretty good. We definitely threw out a lot less. We definitely threw out way less leftovers than we did the week before. I think that this challenge has been awesome to just remind me to think about a couple of things. I have had some pretty weird meals, I have to say, in order to try to meet this challenge. I did it yesterday for lunch. I had a little, like maybe a half a cup of chicken adobo with carrots and some pizza, because, you know.
Oh, pizza goes with anything, though. Pizza is a perfect match for all food.
It is absolutely true. Everybody looked at me like I was a little bit crazy that I was eating adobo and pizza, but let me tell you, there's nothing that mops up that extra adobo sauce like a pizza crust, and it is amazing. Like, I think there's going to be like a Filipino fusion restaurant soon, because it was delicious.
Yeah, you heard all the talk about the pineapple on pizza. I think you've got the new pizza version there.
Man, it was delicious. Let me tell you. I mean, one other kind of cool trick that I did was, my kids are notorious for eating. They're like, I want to eat an apple, and they'll eat like half the apple, and it makes me insane. And usually I'll just eat the rest of it, but sometimes I can't eat all those half apples, right? So this challenge, instead of throwing it in the compost this last week, what I did was I would cut off the part that they ate, or, you know, eat around it. And then I would take the leftover halves and I left them in the fridge. And when I had about 5 or 6 half apples, I threw them in the blender, and then I put them on the stove and made applesauce and added some other frozen berries and put it on plain yogurt, because we also had a big old thing of plain yogurt in the fridge. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do with that? And, you know, I was joking with somebody else.
Great.
It was really delicious, and it sounds like one of those things that I always see on Pinterest that's supposed to take 5 minutes and it looks fantastic. And then when I get to it, it takes like 45 minutes and I'm frustrated. But it actually was really easy. So just like thinking about, is there another way I can deal with this leftover?
Well,
Putting it aside and dealing with it later was pretty awesome. So I
that
felt like it
just
was a win.
reminds me. That's great, Becca. That just reminds me of like my grandparents who would make applesauce every year, and just real food, wholesome ingredients, just a little something tasty on the corner of the plate from
Yeah.
the other stuff. I mean, that's a great way to take your apple parts and save them for more. It's kind of like people taking all the cuttings of their veggies and making vegetable stock. I don't do that one yet, but it sounds great. It sounds wonderful. I of course have chickens in the backyard, so any of my apple cores, I can just chop those up and they go bananas for those. They love them. So, a lot of or corn on the cob. When my son doesn't quite eat every row of the corn off the cob, which I would do, of course, but when he doesn't, perfect for the chickens. They will clean that cob up totally. So, that's fun for us.
Totally. And it's kind of fun. I mean, it's just that awareness, right? It is
Yeah.
really just that awareness of like, what else could I do with this? Do I really need to throw this out into the compost now? Is there a way I could eat it later? If you don't want to eat in that, that particular form, like that apple, making it into something else. And let me tell you, my kids enjoy the applesauce way more than another lecture from me about eating the whole apple. That went over way better.
Well, hopefully you get your timing down. Like it won't take 45 minutes next time you do it. It'll be a little quicker because you've done it before. So
It was actually it was super quick. I mean, I got so much going on like everybody does, and it was like the fact that it literally probably took 5 minutes to stick it all in the blender and then put it on the stove and heat it up. Fantastic. So,
So
all
one
right.
of the
So
things I was going to mention and bring up today was that because I've been home a lot and it just seems like there's a little more TV time going on. We have Netflix, so we watched a couple episodes of that infamous TV show Hoarders.
oh my God.
I know it's intense. It is intense. It's intense for a recycler too to watch the
You're like, oh
cleanup
my
crews
God.
go in and they're just everything. What it does is a show like that, or some of these home fix-up shows, or hoarders, or whatever. Any of these shows, it can kind of inspire you to kind of organize a space, a portion of your house. Whether it's the storage room of the house, or the garage, or the porch, or out the front porch, wherever your coats and mittens and hats and scarves, or just to go through things. We all have this time at home. It's a good time to everything should have its place, and every place should have its everything. How's it going? Anyway, there's some old
Something like that.
like that where you really you take care of what you have is what I'm getting at.
Right.
You care for it, and it lasts longer, and you appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I will probably never watch Hoarders because that's the stuff nightmares are made of. Like I like stuff. Even as an avid recycler, it's like I acquire things. I'm the person that acquires things at my house. So that's like a slippery slope,
Yeah.
alternate reality where Becca's a hoarder.
No.
But it does bring me to our challenge for next week, which is kind of, as you were talking about, there's a lot of things that end up in the trash, maybe, don't need to. At Hoarders, it's usually so nasty that it's just got to go.
Yeah.
But for this week, we're going to take the challenge of trying to rescue 3 things that we would have normally sent to the garbage. So figuring out some really interesting ways to reuse, repair, or salvage something that we normally would have, discarded, which is going to be interesting because I think, Pat and I, we are generally pretty good at this. Pat's got his socks. I got my new scarf, so it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. So I'm excited to see how we do on this challenge.
So that'll be our challenge. But we also want to invite our viewers, everybody out there who is able to send a note in to ask Evelyn to tell us what their items are that they're challenging themselves to now reuse and save and make use of.
Absolutely. And anything that you came up with that you were following along with us with our challenge for last week, any tips about how to throw away a little less leftovers, any interesting meals that you've made, or any kind of cool tips and tricks, definitely either send them to askevelyn@seattle.gov along with your questions, or go ahead and throw them in our comments. And we would love to hear from you guys, and definitely share out to your networks. We would love to have more viewers, and we would definitely love to hear from you guys. So I think that that's another episode of Ask Evelyn. So thank you guys for tuning in. And we will see you again next week, Wednesday, 11:30, Instagram. And for that, I'm Becca Fong.
And I'm Pat Kaufman. We'll see you next week.
All right. See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.